surface of our planet is 75% covered with water, but only 1% of this water is drinkable. Due to climate change caused by catastrophic human activity, the world's drinking water resources have sharply declined. Currently, over 2 billion people do not have access to safe drinking water, which are becoming an increasingly common source of disagreement, political tension, wars, and poverty. The global politicians and the most powerful world leaders try to deal with this crisis in different ways. Meanwhile, high up in the Andes, far from the world of big politics, the rural community, the Collagua, the Indians from the villages of Yanque, every year takes matters into their own hands, leave their homes for a few days to celebrate the ancient rite, the water festival, on Mismi Volcano, and to pay tribute to the mountain deities, pleading for good rains and abundant streams to water their fields. For Indians, everyday living and farming in the harsh climate of the mountain is a fight for survival. To improve their existence and the food supplies, many decades ago the Indians created an irrigation system. Every year, after the autumn harvest, the Collagua set off to the slopes of the Mismi volcano to repair and clean the 60 kilometers long aqueduct which flow a life-giving stream on their crop fields. At dusk, the sound of the trumpet called the patriarchs from the village of Yanque to the gathering. The topic was the rites of the water festival, starting the next morning. Conversations are preceded by drinking chicha, a low-alcohol drink made of fermented maize, and a local wine called pisco. Before consumption, each participant of the assembly poured a few drops of drink in a gesture called chala, in honor of Pachamama, in Indian beliefs is a goddess representing Mother Earth. The debate was started by Don Carlos, the head of the commune, called Sindico. The elders listened to him, chewed coca leaves. To enhance their effect, they mixed them with pieces of calcium bitten off from volcanic stone. For the indigenous peoples of the Andes, the coca leaves is a gift of the gods, a sacred plant, an integral part of the lives from both the cultural and indigenous medicine perspective. Coca leaves are rich in vitamins and mineral, chewed, effectively relieving pain and hunger. In the village, it is still used as a means of payment. A ritual rod called bara was laid on the table. This revered object, handed down from generation to generation, it is the most important possession of Yanque. It is used during the rites of the water festival, symbol of power, unity, and affiliation of old deities and the Christian religion. At the end of the session, a ritual was held to incense bara, whereupon it was wrapped in a white scarf, symbolizing unity, and then the bara was given to one of the elders, who was proclaimed regidor, the guardian of the bara. At the same time, in a nearby thatched stone hut, women prepared dinner, after which the elders set out on the slopes of the volcano. The men marched all night, and only at dawn joined the inhabitants of the village of Yanque, who left their homes the day before and camped near the cap of the glacier on Mismi Volcano. After breakfast, the bara was decorated with a panicle of blooming grass and placed in a central place so that everyone could see it during the rally convened by the village head, Don Carlos. For Indians dependent on agriculture, water festival, bearing the local name of Chacasipi, is the most important rite of the year. giving an opportunity to pleading deities endow good harvest. It takes place every year in August, just before the rainy season, and lasts for 3 days. All villagers take part in it. Women and children will set up camps and prepare meals. Men in 2 groups under the supervision of captains called mayordomo will cleanse and regulate the bed of the Yanque stream. Elders and village shamans will carry out the ritual, known in Spanish as a pago a la tierra, a payment to the earth in several sanctified places. The water ceremony is to emphasize the divinity of water as a gift of deities inhabiting the mountain to people living in the valleys. The deities the Collagua will worship and offer sacrifices are the goddess of rain and rivers, the goddess Cochamama, and the carrying deity of the Mismi volcano called Taita Mismi, he who carries life-giving water fertilizing the Pachamama, fertility goddesses, Mother Earth. After the mayor's speech and the incense of the bara, conducted by the village elders, the first day of works and ceremonies related to the water festival officially began. Men's divided into 2 teams with fervor ran to the head of the glacier from where the Yanque stream flows. Their job was to clean the muddy riverbed and strengthen the creek bank so that the water flows freely at the source into the village and into their fields. At the same time, the village patriarchs, with a shaman named Hamas, went to the place of the first rite. The Collagua are convinced of the interference of ancient gods in their daily lives, that the world of people and the world of gods are inextricably linked with each other. Contact between the divine and the human sphere takes place thanks to the shaman who acts as a negotiator. Village shaman Hamas, on a stone tray called sarmar, put together this year's burnt offerings. There were different kinds of maize, herbs, the vicuña, fat, and coca leaf. During the preparation of the offerings, the magical power of the words spoken by the shaman lies not only in their meaning, but also in their sound embodying their power and effectiveness. The shaman was accompanied by the assistant named Pahe, who during the rite of the water festival will be the mediator between the shaman and the council of patriarch. Prepared by the shaman offerings, Pahe carried to the elders so that there will be breath to it, strengthen their energy. Mumbling spells, Pahe went to the fire and threw the offerings into the flame, sacrificing them to the guardian spirits and Pachamama, the goddess of the earth. The bonfire flame is the epitome of life after death, and the floating smell of burning vicuña fat is to ward off evil spirits. Then Pahe, spilling wine over the fire, pleading the deities for prosperity for the village, greeting the 6 main directions of the world, assigned to divine messengers, the 4 winds, north, east, south, and west, and 2 opposite directions, down toward to the earth, meaning the past, and up toward the sky, defining the future. The formulas and practices related to water festivities have been passed down for generations. The whole verbal setting takes place in Aymara language. Rituals in designated places are led by village shamans and members of selected families, among whom the responsibility of maintaining the old tradition passes from father to son. After incense bara, according to the belief smoke ascends, symbolizes prayer, rising to gods, the patriarch went to a place of worship, where Pahe dismantled a pacheta, a pile of stones covering a hole in the ground from which he extracted last year's gifts dedicated to gods. From the pit, he pulled out 3 bottles, one filled with wine, a symbol of blood, the other with water from the Mismi glacier, and the third with bad water, a bird skeleton, and last year's corn cobs. After a detailed examination and reading of divine messages, Last year's gifts were burned, and water and wine were spilled. The shaman then filled the bottles with water from a stream and decorated them with vicuña, fat, herbs, and coca leaves. He applied the vicuña fat called suho and coca leaves to the bird's skeleton. In Aymara mythology, bird is a messenger of the gods who knows the future. Then, Hamas decorated corn on the cob with coca leaves while begging the deities and ghosts to accept this year's sacrifice. After incense offerings and prayers, Pahe put the offerings into the sacrifice pit as alms to the deities, hoping to ensure a good harvest next year for the village. After placing this year's gifts in a pit, Pahe built a stone apacheta above it, called by the locals the Old Man of the Mountains because of its shape. According to the beliefs of the Aymara's people, apacheta sets in a place marked by divine presence, where live caretaker spirits called achachi, which rule the weather and protect apacheta against intruders. The offering of that day was complete. Just before sunset, several hours of work and ceremonies came to an end, and the whole village went to the lower valley for the night camp. Cold at night will be extreme. To protect themselves, Yanque dug in the rocking slope, wrapped in thick woolen blankets, huddled together. The inhabitants of the village Yanque belonged to the Collagua clan and to the family of Indian Aymara group spread all along the highland of Peru, and derived from the oldest in the Western Hemisphere empire of Tiahuanaco. The social structure of Collagua has not changed for centuries. The natives are organized into self-sufficient communities called Ayu. Ayu communities are characterized by mutual help, collective work, joint decision, and the dedication of time and knowledge for the goods of the village. After a frosty night, Collagua began the second day of rites. In the morning, the head of the commune called assemblies, at which he pointed out some tardiness and asked for more fruitful and collective work. During the mayor's speech in the camp, women prepared breakfast, cooked broth, and baked traditional pulolos and tamales, cakes made of corn flour with chicken stuffing. After breakfast, to the camp cattle, drovers brought horses, mules, herds of llamas, which grazed at nearby slopes at night. Everyone went to fold a night camp. Women packed and prepared luggage. Elderly and young boys flopped mules and tied loads on the backs of pack animals. After the fires were extinguished, numerous caravans went to the site of another camp valley, located more than 20 kilometers below. After chewing morning portion of coca, men, divided into two groups, headed for the mountain stream to enlarge the riverbed and strengthen its banks. The second water festival day began. In the meanwhile, shaman and the patriarchs went to the large monolith, under which there was a sacrificial pit from which last year's gifts were extracted. There were figurines of llamas made from vicuña fat, which, after a detailed examination and reading of the will of the gods, was burnt in a deliberately lit fire. Indians believe that the incense smoke cleanses and removes all negative energies. They believe and trust in shaman power to reverse the course of evil events, prevent diseases and misfortunes they may fall on the village. The shaman must be chosen by the spirits. He must be able to hear the call of the ancient ancestors. Then Hamas made of vicuña fat this year's llama figurines, decorating them with herb seeds and gold crumbs, a symbol of the sun. Molded 3 small images of llamas, put on the hand-woven scarf called a manta, and handed them to be breathed on by elders. then sensed it and submitted to the sacrificial recess. Figures of llamas, according to the Aymara tradition, is a symbol of the Pachamama. According to the Indians, Pachamama, the goddess of land and fertility, established a world order based on respect for nature and its resources. The annual rites of Chakasipi, the water festival, is to convince her that villagers of Yanque still respect her rights, obligations, and recommendations. In the high Andes, the rhythm of life is still determined by the sun, nature, and changing seasons. For the Indians, spiritual contact with the raw Andean nature is very important. They believe that the mountains are gods, giving life through the springs and streams flowing from them. Most peaks have their own guardian spirits called apus, with different features, powers, and character. While the patriarchs conducted rituals, 2 teams of men under the command of captains cleaned and repaired the irrigation canal, which for hundreds of years allowed the distribution of water to the terrace plots in the village called taquipo, on which Collagua grow corn, barley, quinoa, and many varieties of potatoes. Andean, a thin layer of arable land on terraced plots require constant irrigation. Therefore, protecting the water resources from the stream is the duty of the inhabitants of the village of Yanque. The fear of water deficit often caused skirmishes and conflicts with other villages neighboring in the valley. In the place where the dam and the dike stand today, several years ago war broke out about the stream. The Indians from the neighboring village of Collagua interrupted the channel and led the stream to their fields. The dispute could not be settled on a peaceful path of talks. It came to fight on the fists and stones. There was a fight between the inhabitants of both villages. Shot from a slingshot, executed by an Indian from Collagua, deadly wounded a resident of Yanque. In the end, the dispute was won by the residents of Yanque. They repaired the dam, and from that tragic event every year during the water festival, the whole village remembers a heroic co-inhabitant who gave his life for greatest treasure of the village, the water. In the culture of the Aymara Indians, which include the Yanque, there is a specific type of Christianity called religious syncretism. Over the years, Catholic dogmas and practices imposed by the Spaniards and missionaries to local peoples mix with the old pagan beliefs and rituals of the Indians, giving local beliefs new interpretation. Now, the Collagua entrusts to the Catholic gods all formal matters imposed ex officio, and pre-Christian deities entrust existentially matters related to agriculture and shepherding. At dusk, 2 bonfires were lit in the camp, at which all participants of the water festival gathered, talking, joking, enjoying drinking chicha and pisco. In addition, almidon, a low-percentage alcoholic beverage made from potato flour, was brewed by matrons in the kettle. Over time, singing, dancing, and alcohol enveloped the revelers, tearing down all the walls of discord. This collective rite was intended to overthrow the neighborly disgrace that arose in the rural community during the year and unite the inhabitants of the Yanque village again into one compatible family. Andean Indians believe that through consuming large amounts of alcohol and not being able to control their own will, senses, and body, make themselves a total sacrifice to a protective deity and connects with the gods. third day was the last day of the water festival celebration. After breakfast, the woman set off down the slopes to the village of Yanque to prepare for the evening fiesta to honor the annual rituals. The men, on the other hand, went to the nearby steep slope, to the cleft, where a large borderland source was flowing, feeding the Yanque stream. Marching to the beat of a trumpet and snare drum, the men surrounded the place. The village elders and patriarchs rested on the embankment above the throbbing spring called the utero, or womb of the mother. Only one family from the village is assigned to performing a ritual in this place, exactly its male branch. From father to son passes the responsibility of caring for this place and its contents and conducting rites. According to an old Aymara legend, Christian saints, Mary and Jesus, called by the Indians Texaapos, visited the Andean Pampa in the distant past. In the place where they rested, flowers grew, locally called the flowers of the Holy Family. With these flowers, guardians of a mountain spring decorated the stream's banks and incensed the source, stimulating good energy to improve communication with the spirits. Then, from a secret place located just above the beating spring, the guardian pulled out flat stones, arranged in 11 pairs, symbolizing the community of 11 Aymara tribes. Simultaneously, on the slope above the spring, among the elders, 2 glasses of wine and water were served. Before drinking, each of the men ceremoniously poured a few drops of wine and water into the stream in the form of thanks to the surrounding deities. In the stream, guardians sprinkled flour on the ritual stones and decorated them with coca leaves, said prayers. Then, incensed them, they asked God for support. Before hiding ritual stones in the cavity, celebrant ritually spilled wine and water taken from the stream, and, as a gift, offered a Pacific starfish called Kota Warawara, a sign of wealth and fertility. Finally, in the act of purification, once again incensed the stones, secrete compartment, and the torrent source, imploring the ancestor spirits to accept the gifts. A few kilometers below, on the outskirts of the village, on a square limited by drainage ditches, where a 30-meter waterfall of the Yanque River fell, women were waiting in festive costumes. When the men and elder authoritarian reached the square, the women greeted them with huge unleavened heart-shaped pastries, sprinkled with coca leaf wreaths. It was a reward for the village's most distinguished personalities. After a while, the parade began. The banners, the cross, and bara were carried to the sounds of the snare drums. Elements of ancient beliefs and tribal traditions were combined with modern Catholic religious practices. The dancing and fiesta had begun to last all night. Everyone will dance to worship the gods of the mountains, in songs and glances, confidently looking into the future. The children of the Mismi volcano, Collagua, fulfilled their annual duty to guardian deities. Stream carried water abundantly. 3-day rituals and works brought the desired result. The gods were favorable to them, guaranteeing an abundant harvest of potatoes and quinoa in the following year.